In a world that feels increasingly fragmented, many are searching for connection and meaning. All of this and more helps you navigate this path through conversations exploring the intersection of art, faith, and community, and inviting you into greater belonging. All right, welcome to All of This and More. I'm Charlotte Donlin, and I'm so excited to talk to Cara Meredith about her new book, Church Camp, and some other things. Hold your book up one more time for a little bit longer. Church Camp, Bad Skits, Cry Night, and How White Evangelicalism Betrayed a Generation. I'd love to start with just a little bit about you. So tell me and those watching or listening a little bit about you.
Yeah, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area with my family and also my dog, Rufus. I am a writer by day, although I wear a couple of different writerly hats. So I do a lot of my own writing, freelancing, obviously this book, but I also work in development and nonprofit spaces and juggle a couple of part-time jobs, which I say I do to pay the mortgage. And otherwise, I am a postulant for holy orders in the Episcopal Church, which in layman's terms means that I might someday become a priest if all goes well.
Great. Thank you. We are going to start with kind of a general conversation about your reading and writing life that includes other things. And then we'll move into a conversation about the book more specifically. My first question for you is, how do reading and writing help you belong to yourself, others, and the world?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful question. I am not myself unless I have a book to read. I am not myself unless I'm able to process through the ways in which I belong to the world through writing. So for me, reading takes up a fair amount of time of my time. I have my coffee, my early morning cup of coffee reading. I have the reading that happens throughout the day, a lot of times via audiobooks. I have my nighttime reading, which is always fun. I always say I can't read anything that makes me think past 8 o'clock or so. So no nonfiction after 8 p.m. And otherwise, writing, I can be a verbal processor, but I've learned as I've gotten older, I process by writing, by getting pen to paper or fingers to keys. And in that way, that is how I formulate my thoughts and how I belong to the world.
Hmm. Thanks for that answer. I love the rule, no reading that makes you think after 8 p.m. I feel like it should be on a sign.
Let's make it,
Yeah, t-shirt,
yeah,
magnets.
yeah.
That's a good, I probably need to follow that rule now that I know that rule. I don't like to follow rules, but that's one that would serve me well.
Well, otherwise, I mean, I'm looking at the painting behind you, of which this podcast is themed, and there's so much that happens within every single one of us that we carry within us. And I know for me, I've been on the Enneagram, I'm a head person, and so it all lives up in my head. So I can't like it's I mean, it's the same for me with screens. I'm very, very sensitive. I don't sleep if I have too much in my head because my mind is just brimming with all the different parts of me, with all the different stories. So it truly is a way of self care, but it also is a way of just decompressing and also embracing fun. Like, I need some fun reading in my life. Doesn't mean it has to be brainless, but it just can't be so heady that it makes me think.
Okay, so what's your fun reading right now?
Oh, I have to look it up.
Or
It's
recently, you know.
recently. Well, I believe in fiction at night. I'm reading a middle grade novel with my 10-year-old son. So I usually read with him for a little bit. The middle grade novel is called Samantha Spinner and the Spectacular Specs. I'm still deciding what I think about it, but I do like reading out loud to him, and I will do that as long as he lets me. And then I'm reading Here I Am by Jonathan Safran Foer. I don't know if you've read him. He, yeah, his is a long book. It's almost 600 pages. I'm not usually a 600-page reader. I like to get through things a little quicker, but it's an adventure in a story that is intriguing.
Okay. I have seen that, but I have not bought it, probably because it's 600 pages.
Yeah. I'm
But
happy to
I want to
mail it
hear,
to you when I'm done if you'd like to read it. I'm not keeping it, which I
or
don't know
let
what
me know
that
if it's
says.
worth the 600
Yeah.
pages, worth the time. So it sounds like it might be. It sounds like it is. So what are some comfort reads that you return to again and again?
Oh my gosh. Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard is my all-time favorite book. It is spirituality, it is nature, it is God, it is mystery. It is made me want to be a writer. So that is the book I return to all the time. I love Annie Dillard. I have read a number of other things that she's written, but I always return to that one. I hope someday to write a more naturey garden-esque book, and I'm
Hmm.
going to fully be channeling my inner Annie Dillard. Um, Otherwise, I believe in the Annies, so I love Annie Lamott. I feel like the amount of Anne Lamott that I've read makes me allowed to call her Annie, as some of her friends do in her books. But I keep hoping to run into her. We both live in the Bay Area. I work once a month at a church that's in her town. I'm like, come on, Annie, show up. Just show up on a Sunday morning. It hasn't happened yet, but I'm hopeful. And otherwise, as far as fiction, I just reading Susan Howatch. I don't know if you've read anything by her. She wrote Glittering Images a long time ago, which is one of my favorites. This other one I just read is called The High Flyer. But she's a fiction writer, but she oftentimes writes at this intersection of spirituality. This one was this super funky spirituality meets like exorcism. That I think only the weird religion people, like those weird religion nerds, would probably like delight in, which I did. So I love Susan Howatch though.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think I've read her before. So good to
Oh,
know.
she's so good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, in addition to books and reading, what other forms and genres of art, and when I say art, I mean film, TV, visual art, photography, what have you, what has nourished you over the past few months?
Mm. Over the past few months, I have been I had somewhat of a medical crisis at the beginning of the year, end of 20. I don't even know what year we're in, 2024, beginning of the year. So there's been a
Okay.
lot of simply at home time and
Mm.
not getting out. But the first thing that actually came to mind, which is not something you named, but there's deep beauty in nature and in my backyard and in my garden and in that space I'm creating. Yesterday, I went out and turned up all the cover crops, which you oftentimes put over the soil in the winter to help the soil, and just was delighted to see what was growing there. There were, I mean, it was like I was like, oh my gosh, there's some sugar snap peas. I don't know how that got in the cover crop, um, bag of cover cropness that went over it, but it did. But also seeing the tulips, seeing this one sage bush that just had the most gorgeous purple flowers trailing down the end. These artichokes popping up. Artichokes come up every single year. They're an annual, and just starting to see them spring up. So to me, if I can make that count, that is it. That is the beauty in the world, just right out my back door, and I relish in that every single day.
It counts, definitely.
Thank you.
I love doing Visio Divina, which is, for
Mm-hmm.
those who may not know, contemplative practice, which is a close looking at art, but also using nature.
Mm-hmm.
So finding one thing, your artichoke stalk for
Mm-hmm.
15 minutes and going through the Visio Divina exercise,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
I would love for you to do that and tell me how it goes.
Yeah.
If you want to, if you have
Yeah.
time for that, using that Visio Divina practice in nature is so
Yeah.
lovely and
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
Like, what does the writing life feel like to you from a nourishment depletion standpoint? This is obviously not a typical like season. We're not always in the month before a book comes out, but
Mm-hmm.
what is that like for you right now?
Yeah, I would call it more depletion than nourishment right now. I think for anyone who's released a book, I mean, really, releasing a book into this world is as much or as little of marketing as you want to do, but marketing can be such a big part of it. So I think that word marketing, a lot of creatives, we don't want to have to market ourselves because we just want to get to write, and yet oftentimes if we want to sell the book, we have to get the word out. So that's where a lot of my writing right now is just trying to pump up the book. It's continuing to write about and point toward the book. And a lot of the writing that I'm doing otherwise is just to get my name out there right now. So I don't want to say it feels icky, but there's not a whole lot of nourishment that's happening. It's one of those that it's all pointing toward February 29th. And my hope
April
after,
29th.
yeah, see, I don't even know. See, I'm already depleted.
It's okay.
I'm gonna go do Lectio Divina right after this. But yeah. So my hope after this, it's one of those that I just go, okay, the big push is coming, but after that, like it's out of my hands. So I'm gonna do what I can right now, and there's gonna be a big push, and I'm gonna forget what month it is, but also then the book's gonna be here, and we're just gonna sit back and relax. So my hope after that is to certainly calm down. As you can see on the wall behind me, I've been working on a
Beautiful.
middle grade novel off and on for the last couple of years. And it's about 40% of the way done, but I really it is this middle grade novel is it is fun. I'm having so much fun with it. And so my goal after launch season, after things calm down, is to just finish it, but in a non-pressured, really fun, life-giving, nourishing sort of way. Because I love everything that I've researched and my mind has created and put together so far. So that's where I'm going. So if you can just ask me
Okay,
about that,
I
maybe
love
like in
that.
October, that would be great.
I will definitely.
Yeah.
I'll add it to my calendar because I
Yeah.
won't remember, but I'll put it on my
It's on
calendar.
you. Yeah, no. Good job.
But what a beautiful kind of like cycle that you're naming for
Yeah.
yourself right now of this
Hmm.
like hard work push for
Yeah.
this book coming
Hmm.
out. And then you get to have some fun in a
Yeah.
slower kind of
Hmm.
organic, let it unfold way
Yeah.
with a different genre, a
Yeah.
different way of being with your creative process, which
Hmm.
is lovely.
Yeah.
And I know the writing life isn't super nourishing. It would actually be depleting for you right now, but thank God for your time in nature that is nourishing you and other things in your life that are nourishing you. Like
Yeah.
we need the
Hmm.
whole thing.
Yeah.
And speaking of your book, let's go on and like transition into talking about your book. For listeners who aren't familiar with the church camp experience, what are, a few things you want them to know about church camp?
Yeah. Well, this is an invitation into a subculture of white evangelicalism that I think people are either very, very familiar with or very, very unfamiliar with. It's either a language they speak or something they go, wait a minute, what are we talking about here? And for me, as an Episcopalian on the other side of evangelicalism, not being a part of that side of the church anymore, as I have morphed and evolved in my own spirituality and who I am and my belief systems, there are things that I have left behind and there are things that I continue to hold. And so when it comes to the church camp experience, I would say more than anything, this book is deeply theological. Even if readers don't necessarily, even if that isn't how it fully presents, it's also spiritual memoir, it's also investigative journalism. It's this funky hybrid mix of all of the above. But to me, because it is laid out and presented by the seven main talks that I gave as a camp speaker for nearly 2 decades, that is at the heart of it. And I think that is what I'm inviting readers to understand, hoping that also maybe it opens up doors for understanding more about what's going on in our country today, what's going on with a lot of the people who hold the power, who are making decisions, but also in understanding things like the 81% that keeps on voting and who is that 81% and understanding who they are. So I think all of these things are part of the bigger conversation around church camp itself.
Yes, I will say it's a lovely book. And it's
Thank you.
I would say it's more memoir than anything, but we're not allowed to
Yeah.
write memoirs, right?
Yeah.
Unless we're famous. And I mean it's a good
Yeah.
hybrid memoir. I mean, I'll
Hmm.
call it that. And the research is great. The conversations you include about others' experiences of church camp
Mm-hmm.
are woven beautifully throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
So, from a craft standpoint, I just have to say it's so well done. And congratulations on using this lens of church camp to explore
Mm-hmm.
a few different things with regards to evangelicalism and spirituality and Christianity. I would love to just start talking about your book, but I want to hear from you more. So, one question I have for you is, what did you discover about yourself and maybe your faith that you didn't notice before you wrote the book?
Yeah, I think if anything, it showed me how much I still needed to know and understand, and to use an old phrase, plumb the depths of. I found myself sometimes defending that I had said on the stage that I knew I didn't believe anymore. So, for instance, one of the talks, so to speak, that I gave for years, we would introduce kids to God, and then we would introduce kids to Jesus, and then we would just be like, "And you're a sinner." Like, and I didn't actually say from the stage, "You're a dirty, rotten little sinner," but it's almost like that was what was implied. And the reality is that I may not have given that sermon or talk or speech. That was the last time I spoke at camp was, I think, 2014. So it's been a good 11 years since I've been in that environment. But those belief systems were still so ingrained within me. And so I had to figure out what I really believed and who I was on the other side of it all, because I know that it didn't I knew that it didn't align within me, but I couldn't necessarily even always pinpoint or put words to it. And I think I also, because, and I write about the tension of the both and a lot. This was such a lovely, life-giving time for me, but it also is a time and a place, but it also is a time and a place that I see harm, the harm that I caused, the harm that others received in what we believed, in what we communicated, in what happened there. And I found myself sometimes defend those places and those people, not because I even agreed with them anymore, but because it was just this, it was still in me. I don't know how else to say that. And so how do you then wrestle through the tension of the both and, but also be firm about who you are and what you believe and what you want to communicate and give to the reader? So that was unexpected.
But it also kind of set up the structure for the book
Mm-hmm.
because each chapter takes the reader through what you used to think, what you used to believe, and then ends with,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is what I know now.
Yeah,
And this is a new way of seeing this particular aspect of what I've been talking about, you know.
yeah.
Um,
Well, do you know where
so
that
it's,
came from?
tell me.
That came from our friend Lauren Winner. And that came from the writing weekend that you,
Oh,
Charlotte,
good.
were the
Okay.
spiritual director for. And so I had just gotten the idea of the book and had just started writing about it, but I couldn't figure out how to put all the pieces together. And Lauren and I sat on her back porch, and she goes, "Well, maybe you break every chapter up into three parts. What I said, what was wrong with what I said, and what we could say instead." And I was like mind blown.
That was
And
a
so
brilliant idea,
it was
and you
brilliant. Yeah.
executed wonderfully, I
Yeah.
must say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and it gave people like me who didn't grow up in the church camp thing like
Hmm.
a way in because I'm like, I didn't go to church camp every summer
Yeah.
or work there for however many years, but these concepts are what I was simmering
Yeah.
in for 20 something years in evangelicalism. And
Hmm.
so it was like it's a broader conversation than church
Hmm.
camp.
Yeah.
It's patriarchy, it's white supremacy, it's racism, it's all the things.
Hmm.
But I love the interesting lens of church camp through which we see those things.
Yeah.
I do think the structure works, and it's interesting to me that that structure helps you navigate your defensiveness
Hmm.
and come to terms with like what you believe now, which
Hmm.
is great. That's why we write,
Thanks.
or
Yeah.
one reason why we write.
Yeah.
How did writing this book and like going through that process affect how you parent your kids or how you want to parent them with regard to their faith and spiritual lives?
Yeah. When I am asked some version of this question, whether it's that question or will you, do you, have you sent your kids to church camp? I often start with the fact that we had this wild thing that happened throughout the world called the pandemic. And the pandemic flipped turned upside down my relationship with religion and spirituality and the institution of the church, but also my family and my children's as well. And to the point where, all of a sudden, especially here in the Bay Area, I mean, we were not allowed inside churches for over a year. They weren't allowed in churches or schools. I mean, things were just closed. So it was all Zoom church. And if church didn't work for your family, meaning it didn't work for my neurodivergent family, then it just didn't work at all. So it was so we had there was that critical piece, but also there was this place and time in which when I could have sent my kids to church camp, that's when the pandemic was happening, at least originally. And so we didn't jump on this train, and we still could jump on it. But it's interesting now when it comes to faith and spirituality, because when I am asked a question like that, I think of the environment in which I was raised, and I think about the environment in which my spouse and I are raising our kids. And it is much more open. They very much know what we believe, and they do go to church with us. We don't necessarily go every Sunday. So I'm not sure how I'm going to be a priest. Don't tell my bishop. But I mean, they do go with us, but also sometimes we don't. And sometimes we pray before dinner, and sometimes we don't. And sometimes we read books, the Book of Belonging, which is this beautiful book of children's stories that also is highly applicable for adults as well. And sometimes we don't. And so there is an open handedness and openness to the way in which we are viewing faith and spirituality. We are a mixed race family, and we are erring heavily on the side of inclusion, of everyone belonging, not only of different races, but of genders, of different sexualities, of whoever it is that walks through the door of our house, or that walks on the sidewalk in front, or that shows up in their classroom at school, that we are being inclusive toward all. And that to me certainly is, I hope, part of what I incorporate in the book, because it's who I believe God to be. But that is really how we're raising our kids when it comes to God and faith and religion.
That's lovely. Thank you for sharing that. And I definitely would say this is a book about belonging. Like, I noticed the themes everywhere throughout the whole book, and, who's belonging where, who's belonging to who, what are the places
Yeah.
where we feel most like ourselves, where we feel welcomed, and where we
Mhm.
don't.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would love for you to read a couple hundred words, a couple of paragraphs from the book that represent, at least in part, the mind, body, and soul space you are inhabiting right now,
Yeah.
or one of the spaces.
Absolutely. So I think the first one was actually from the prologue, and it speaks partially to the both and that I feel. And I think that's just it has been the theme of my life for the last several years. But when I looked at that question, this was exactly what I thought. Within my body, church camp has housed my greatest joy and my greatest grief. Nowhere have I felt more alive, more in tune with the presence of God. And nowhere have I also mourned the damage done to others and the damage done to me, too often in the name of Jesus, for the things we thought stood for Jesus, as we sheltered under the umbrella of white evangelicalism. Church camp has been the source of some of my deepest hurts, just as it has been the foundation of some of the sincerest kindnesses and generosities I have ever known. I have been publicly ridiculed, mocked, and doubted. I have wept for the names called me and the assumptions made about me. I have mourned the loss of relationships, of those I once thought would be around forever. But I whisper these words alongside the truth that camp has also been a rock of genuine goodwill and bounty to me, a place I felt most at home and applauded for my gifts, a place that made me want to be a better person. Camp shaped me into the human I am today, even if I sometimes wish I could hit the rewind button a couple thousand times.
Mm. that really does capture the both and kind of tension that is evident throughout the whole book. How how does that both and present itself now with this distance from church camp? Like, where else do you see it? Or do you have to
Yeah.
grapple with it?
I mean, it's everywhere. It's like all of life. I mean, this you might remember this from some of our conversations, but this book started with the tension of the both and, where it actually started in the pandemic. And and maybe we just keep going back to the pandemic within this, but I had written a proposal and several sample chapters for another book, which was called Both Can Be True. And when I was trying to get a second book published, I it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I just remember feeling this weightiness of life where there were these moments of great joy, but it was also filled with great grief. So for instance, in my everyday normal life right now, my 10-year-old kid just broke his leg 3 days ago. Like that there's actually mostly no there's no joy in that. But the reality is at the moment in which it happened, in which he was bouncing, jumping on this giant bouncy pillow, was a moment of great joy while we were camping, when we were just eating marshmallows for dinner, and when we smelled like campfire smoke. Like it was so good. And then this happened, and obviously it was filled with great grief and pain. And that might be kind of a silly example, but to me, it's so indicative of so many moments of life. So for me, that happened in the pandemic. I wrote all these chapters comparing the two together, these two different opposite words. The book didn't get picked up. We couldn't find anyone to publish it because I don't have, 100,000 followers who would buy a book of essays, as we going back to point A. But from that, there were a lot of publishers who were interested in an actual event, a specific place and time of the both and they just said, well, if you can find one instance of the both and in your life, maybe that is what you can and should write about. And so that's how the book came to be, which I realize is not actually answering the question that you just posed, but
No, it
to me,
does. It
it's
does.
all of
And
life.
even
Yeah.
yeah, and even with the writing life, there's the disappointment of not getting that book picked up, but it led
Yeah.
to this book. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it formed you to be who you would be when you needed to write this
Yeah.
book. And then writing this book probably formed you in ways that you wouldn't have been formed if that other book was
Yeah.
picked up.
Yeah.
So yeah, there is disappointment and joy and
Yeah.
sorrow and delight
Mhm.
everywhere all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
So okay. No, I like your examples. They're real life examples.
Good. Super.
So yeah. Well, let me see. I would love for you to read, let's see, a couple more paragraphs from the book that you wish people who love you would read and reread regularly. And we'll
Mm,
close with this question and maybe a little bit of conversation after.
okay. Okay. I'm hoping this is the right thing. You ready? This is from the epilogue. Apparently, I'm just bookending our readings.
That's
Libby
okay.
became my respite at odd hours throughout the day. Want to go on another walk, Libby? Want to explore, Libby? We do not venture to anything I've not explored 1,000 times before. The hills are harder on my knees, but the bay laurels and the Douglas firs, the willow trees up at the top of the property, and the redwoods down below are all the same. The 11-mile-an-hour signs are the same. The wagon wheel and the campfire pit and the zip line where I dressed in Americana red, white, and blue and threw watermelons to the ground while Lenny Kravitz's American Woman played in the background are all the same, too. As Libby and I stood in that place, surrounded by a tower of trees, swallowed up by different shades of green and brown and gray, I thought of a song we sang the campers each night before they went to bed. May the Lord, mighty God, bless and keep you forever, give you peace, perfect peace, courage in every endeavor. Lift up your eyes and see his face, filled with grace and love. May the Lord, mighty God, bless and keep you forever. The same God I met as a summer staffer in 1998 was still there. The same God was still in me, for that same God was still present in that place. Maybe the truth is this: even if and when and as we change, even as we evolve and tear down and reconstruct new versions of faith, we are found enveloped in a mystery who meets us in that place, who looks over us with grace and love.
Amen.
Amen. I was trying to decide if I should sing that song or not, but I was like, I don't know if I've warmed up my vocal cords enough.
Well, is there anything you'd like to share about the book or anything we've talked about or anything we haven't talked about before we wrap up?
No, I think Charlotte Donlan is fabulous. I hope you saw yourself thanked at the end of the book. No, I'm grateful for our time together.
Great.
Yeah.
And tell us the best places to find you. Website, social media. What are your favorite places to be
Yes.
right now?
I am mostly at Instagram, on Instagram, although I am at other socials. My handle there is Cara Meredith Writes. I'm on Substack, carameredith.substack.com, and my website is carameredith.com.
Great. I will add all of those links to the show notes
Thank you.
that everyone can access at allofthisandmore.com. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about your new book that's, I mean, I could say is out today because I think this episode will release on April 29th. So
Boom shakalaka.
very
It's
cool.
perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that works out. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, my friend.